Today I'm starting another recording. I guess you could tell because you're listening to another recording. And it is about cryptids, which are kinds of creatures that are existing. They're mythological creatures of the kinds that have to do with shaman myths. Particularly as I understand the definition of a cryptid. I have to include the definition of a cryptid in this audio segment somewhere. I have several examples that I found, but I was looking for stories. As it turns out, these are coveted stories to read, and I'm not going to be the person to reread other people's podcasts that are quite excellent already when they need me. So I tried to ignore that probably everything to read online has been already podcasted somewhere, but that if I look the first time, you can easily see there's audio, and if I look a second time on some sites, there aren't directly links that are easy to find for the audio narration of the online written story. So I picked, Ranker, Outside Magazine, Portalist, and of course BuzzFeed, and Cult Nation. I think that's the name of the to read from. BuzzFeed only had some very few stories, and they're pretty well-known accounts. And then another little-known magazine called Graveyard Shift. There are some really outrageous websites that are pretty famous, like Creepypasta, that you can just find online that tell you first-hand account stories, and they all look very good. But I don't have any access, really, to anybody's compilations. I don't have a way of doing research. This is all for self-glory. This is just to read some accounts online of different kind of phenomena. I love reading phenomena, and I just wanted to maybe do some stories online. So since my other website, like I said, went down, and I got some really good reception on it, and I even had some regrets that I couldn't continue it, which is pretty nice. I thought when I came back, I'd try and diversify a little bit more from just like fictional reads from Readsy, which is an excellent site. I intend to get back to some of that at some point. Reading stories from Readsy, that's a wonderful resource, and I intend to use that to keep myself going when I can't find accounts of real stories online that aren't like more than a little bit casually borrowed. Everything here is borrowed, none of it's my own. I'm going to be fighting pop-up ads throughout this whole audio. I'm seriously hitting this with a big preface because I'd like you all to understand and remember on my behalf that I have no connection to any origination of any of these accounts. And that's about all I'm going to say. I hope to gosh, I don't have too hard of a time trying to read from this, but because the pop-up ads are crazy, but I think I may be able to make it. So, let me see, was there anything else? At some point in this audio, I know I have an article that defines the variable types of cryptids. And if not, I'll go back and find that article and end the audio with it. I don't know how long this will be. I might cut it up into two because I was actually fortunate enough from those sources to find quite a few accounts that look pretty good. I've been listening to YouTube stories on skinwalkers, shapeshifters, wendigos, Bigfoot, and I really think it's fascinating, whether it's fiction or true accounts retold, because I also study cults. Not that I'm not a cult master by any means. I haven't joined a cult ever in my lifetime, but I also study cults as kind of like the breakdown of what would you say? The breakdown of kind of like civilized peace throughout the world in the latter days. And I really feel, from my point of view, that it's the massive pressure to join a cult instead of trying to continue on with the idioms of faith, because most people are pushed out of church at some time because of tragedies within the church that are political. So you're stuck at home with your books, and most people don't like that. Church is also a way of being civilized and socializing, so many people get dragged into cults, and they can't stand on their own ground with, finding a way with faith. And many people do. It just depends, but being carried away by cults is one really big thing. I have studied scripture all of my life on my own, so I don't really have a point of view besides an independent point of view. And I have always felt strongly that it's this miscarriage of justice towards occult acceptance and the mispractices and the illegal practices of cults to claim a faith in tradition of occult acts, which has no government in any nation in the world. Their practices are not accepted. So if you look at I'm not against shamanism. I'm all for shamanism, actually, but I'm saying there are atrocious acts as opposed to proper acts as opposed to false acts. And, shamanism really doesn't pay off for itself unless you're talking about blood cults, which is the horror that we're talking about. So I probably shouldn't be outspoken about this, but I feel that bad sometimes. And while I'm watching these videos and listening to them more than anything else, because then I can do other things. I really like listening to stories. You can just keep on with what you're doing if you don't have to stare at the visual. Sometimes that's nice. Or, of course, it's nice to have a visual, too. Depends on the time you've got. Anyway, so moving on. But, blood cults are not good because that just means death worship. And I'm sorry to have to say this, but I'm the kind of person who believes in surviving rigor mortis stories. I have never had a life where I don't understand that at some point I realize that there are people who are talking to everybody from beyond that they're manifesting at some point, and they're unexplained, and that many of these souls and spirits have gone on and have been captured by cults and have been brought back to life to serve them, and that they take more people, and their false shamanism continues to grow. They aren't interested in any kind of science or metaphysical science or astrological science or science. They're interested in death cults and death worship, especially in the latter days. So I don't mean to be too preachy, but if you're listening to these stories, they're miraculously evil, and they tell their stories so well. So there is a possession factor over the lost, the dead, and their spiritual reappearing, which happens by the false creationism of the sacrifices from death in the possession, in occurring of the possession, the melting of the souls between the creative status of creatures not human and creatures human, especially seem to cinch the occurrence for the false spirits, the false shaman spirits. So the shaman cultists have done this to themselves, and they've gained possession over themselves. So they're not ever seen. They're only seen as these cryptids, and they come forward when they've made a grand, civilization of their own. I'm accusing all sorts of nations of having made false civilizations. I feel that bad sometimes of the things I think I know. I shouldn't be talking this way, but so I am. So you won't get me to confirm what I'm saying to anybody. I don't feel conversant with saying this. I don't mind making statement to it here and saying my point of view, but to actually make it political with somebody else, I'm not interested in going down that road. I really feel that what I'm saying has some great deal of validity. As I say, in these latter days, they're just so atrocious. So I'm accusing that some of these ranches, not just Skinwalker, have really made their own kind of place. We see so many strange things happening, and they have to have an explanation, and I believe they're all from these kind of occult sciences, ancient traditions that were fallen that are brought back. So what I'm saying is the shaman leader never appears. He only appears in the sense of the monstrous cryptid demon that he is, and then he provokes essentially what is a cult murder to those other people who are still living, who see what's gone on. I don't know if they're drawing them in. By the account stories on YouTube, they are not. But anyway. So I haven't read these stories yet. I don't think they even compare to any of the things I'm listening to. There's like that. I don't know if they're released. I kind of might have some priority. I'm not sure anymore. COVID completely locked me out to reality, and I've had time to do all sorts of interesting things, including finally learn a little bit more about these Wendigos and Skinwalkers. Have plagued my study of anything, faith or cult or whatever, all my lifetime. I have not been able to, really do follow-up because of whatever else comes first in an ordinary day to anybody. And, even in working on the periphery of the cryptid science, if I did. So I meant to, and I finally had the chance to, and wow, what a revelation. But there are some really horrible stories, even from just the recent past. And they're all connected to the downfall of what were these horrible, I don't even know the names for them, but the great beast cults. So following up behind them were these other kinds of beast cults, which were shaman cults, which were possession cults. And they were related somehow, but I don't know the social extremism of that at any point. Anyway, wow, that puts a different perspective. If I want to be controversial, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, I used to have such a horrible idea of arms dealers. Ideal because they're just fanatics. That's all they think about. They can't think of anything else, even if they get a rest from it. And I'm thinking, what is the only way out of something like that? It's insane. Anyway, whatever and wherever I was, I'm not saying either. So this is from Graveyard Shaft, the online website. And the article is Terrifying Stories of Skinwalkers, the Legendary Shapeshifters. As I say, I've not read any of the stories. This is totally cold reading. This is their introduction. Every culture has scary stories about mysterious beings, and Native Americans are no exception. The Navajo legend of the Skinwalker is particularly chilling because so many individuals claim to have had real-life encounters in the present day. Modern stories of encountering a skinwalker mostly take place in the American Southwest, but they've also been reported as far away as Australia. You may be wondering, what is a skinwalker and why are they so scary? According to legend, a skinwalker, also known as Yi Nald Lushi, is a witch or medicine man who specializes in shape-shifting and wields supernatural powers to prey on others. Commonly confused with other myths such as werewolves or Wendigos, the legends of skinwalkers tell a different tale in which evil humans can change into any animal just by using that animal's skin. Some say the legend of the skinwalker is very real, and others refuse to speak of them in fear of tempting them to appear. Whether you are a believer or a skeptic, stories about skinwalkers can be terrifying. If you're looking for a new nightmare or two, check out these scary skinwalker stories and decide for yourself whether the legends are true. I have always had exposure to cryptids. So not that I'm fearless by any means. I don't like to tempt evil, but it's a self-tempting time. Evil is tempting itself. I think I'd get people to agree with me if, I had a way of being more convincing that it's kind of just biting everybody. Whatever is just evil occult is just reaching out under assumptions of, there being, having won so much grounds. So anyway, I'm still, like I say, I'm ignorant of the Wendigo skinwalkers other than, what has been my exposure to it under ignorant terms. I would provoke the idea that I wouldn't be willing to make myself seem more realistic, but when you're just, like I say, working through every day of your life, you don't really have a better story than what it seems. So you don't always get on with the fantasy of other things that you might want to know about. That's all I can present on that. But on YouTube, they're saying that they're all one creature. So there are several differing opinions right now about the difference between a skinwalker, a shapeshifter, and a Wendigo. I don't know what the actual authority would say. Okay, story 1. Maybe trying to hit it wasn't the best idea. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington, New Mexico. We mostly deliver small packages out to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the larger delivery companies to bother with. My dad is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona. on the Navajo reservation about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets the call for the job while he is chilling with his Navajo friend Travis and his girlfriend. Travis mentions how he's got a family in Window Rock that he hasn't seen in ages and suggests they go with him. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and it was the summertime, so Dad decides we'll go down together. He can do his delivery really quick. Then while Travis sees his family, we can go check out the Window Rock, big rock face with a large hole in it that goes to the other side. Pretty cool. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad's was loaded down with freight. We decided to bring along some talkies so we could communicate with one another. We spend our time in Window Rock. Everything is generally uneventful, and we start heading home along the old highway with my dad and I in front, and Travis and his girlfriend in their truck behind us. I honestly don't remember most of the Window Rock trip, but this next part I can never forget. We're somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup, New Mexico. It had just rained earlier in the day, and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left of the highway, there is nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right, there's a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We cross the top of this hill, and down at the bottom of the hill, we see what appears to be a very large dog sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio, "Hey, Trav, do you see that big-ass dog?" Travis starts yelling back over the radio, "That is not a dog. Speed up right now and hit it." He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, "Hit it. You have to hit it. Please, please, hit that effing thing right now." So my dad starts to speed up, and as we get a bit closer, I can begin to see it a little more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us, and it has a face. I don't know how else to describe it other than a mix between a bear's and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted and almost in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize it's actually effing huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches, it is about shoulder height with the hood of the truck. Whew. We literally get inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like someone screaming as their lungs were filling with water, and it leaps backwards towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. Then with another leap, it's gone from sight. Travis comes over the radio again. And then he goes, "Holy shit. Keep driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." He kept repeating that last part. "We have to get out of here and we have to go faster." Pretty soon we're speeding like crazy, and just as we start to come near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Travis pulls his truck over with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Travis felt the need to pull over as well. Travis says, "We just saw a skinwalker a few miles back, and it's been following us." The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about a verbal warning, gets in his car, and takes off. We do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Travis refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it that way. Wow. Next one, story 2. Tap tap at the window. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up chopping, gathering firewood for my grandmother, because it was getting dark. Driving back on a dirt road at about 30 miles per hour, give or take 5 miles per hour, I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window on the passenger side, my uncle quickly shouted, "Don't!" I completely froze. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest, and then completely stopped when I heard a tap-tap on my window. My uncle sped up and was loudly praying in my native language. I didn't know what was going on and thought it was over till our truck suddenly dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me and don't turn away," over and over. Then I heard it again, tap, tap, but from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed and the truck dipped again. My uncle looked around inside. It was quiet beside the truck and the road. He looked at me and said, "We will ask your father to do a prayer in the morning so the evil will forget our faces." I remember curling up on the seat and just staring at the radio, watching the time, listening to my uncle sing an old prayer till we got to my grandmother's house. I called my uncle because I had a nightmare about it that night. We talked about it for a bit. He said, "I don't see faces, just eyes, like brake lights you see on the road. It watched you." Before hanging up, I tried joking with him about it. "Why didn't you just step on the brake when it was in the back?" No laughter, just a pause. "Because it wasn't alone." That's scary. If you think that through, you're just going to hitch a ride with them and then they're stuck with them. There's no way out of that, according to any of the folklores that I'm listening to. There are, if you put a distant meter between the situation and itself unfolding, but if you cross the line from the timing of the situation into its activity, engaging with the creature, whatever it calls itself, it pretty much owns all of the activity of your times. I have no clue what you do to disengage it. I have no engagement or disengagement with any of the folklores. I seem to be part of a folklore situation from the beginning of time that isn't native anything or not native anything. It's just cultural. I guess I have like some shamanism in my background is what I'm saying. So and I also have a great deal of religion in my background, theology, literally, not just religion. So between theology and shamanism, which is hard to find in most people, the problem, it's still a nightmare existence between banshees and literal shapeshifters. I don't know. I haven't really met any of these like false creatures, though. I try and live a clean life, so I don't really make an intersection to seeing anything. Ghosts, literally. Living ghosts, what other kind of paranormal things? Just paranormal things. That's been my whole life. It doesn't have a credible, but skinwalkers mean like shapeshifters. I can't make, but the actual creature status, what they're saying, the possessive occult creature status, I don't serve any occult creature status. In fact, right now I'm trying to learn about it because I'm feeling like it's reaching out to me, and I'm trying to distance myself to it. I don't have any connection to that. It has to be something. I hate to say this, but it's a physical cause and effect. It has to be something that handles itself as a chip on your shoulder or a chip in your hand. It's like a playing chip, and I don't keep anything like that going unless I know what I'm doing. I don't interface with anything on an ignorant basis or on a provocative basis unless I believe I know what I'm doing. So most of these creatures are now attacking people, and I don't think that has any fairness. I'm trying to figure out where the ideology that this is the age of unfairness has come to. I'm not saying that it's fair that people have been taken, but I'm saying that it requires a lifetime of much greater, safety if you have knowledge of these things than just to make assumptions that there's, some spiritual view that has to be protecting you, because this is not true. You have to be standing in your bones when they come for them. You can't be moving around and doing a dance for the devil. I shouldn't have said that, but yes, okay. Let me go on now. So I'm going to read this third one and then take one of my famous breaks. Story 3, don't get off the bus. Anybody that has been on the Navajo reservation has either probably heard of some creepy things or have experienced pretty creepy things, namely skinwalkers. I have only seen one. Here's my story. I come from a small town in northern Arizona that's sandwiched between the Paiute Reservation to the north and the U.S. largest Navajo Reservation to the south. My high school being so small, 1A high school that has, on average, 80 students enrolled every year. Always had to travel south about 5 to 10 hours one way to play another high school in any sport. This means that we traveled a lot on the Navajo Res. And we also usually stayed at hotels when we would head out to play and come home in the morning, but this trip was a little bit different. I remember the basketball coach saying that the school didn't have enough money to put up the teams in a hotel that trip, so we were going to be on the road for a total of about 12 hours. I was the only male senior to play basketball that season. We had just got done playing our game and headed home on our bus, Big Blue. We were headed out, and it wasn't long, about 2 hours of driving before we had entered the res. By this time, everyone was asleep, and it was asleep with it being about 2 in the morning. When we had crossed the res's border, I noticed the bus driver had sped up and was now going about 85 miles per hour. I thought this was a little weird because he never exceeded the speed limit, at least not in my high school career. For some reason, I couldn't fall asleep like the rest of my teammates, and I just sat at the back of the bus staring out across the desolate desert landscape that was lit up by the full moon. As I looked out, I could see a figure running towards the bus at an angle of pursuit and keeping up with the bus at 85 miles per hour. As the figure got closer, I saw that it was a humanoid form. As a matter of fact, it looked exactly like a human, only that the face was painted half black and half white with glowing eyes. Glowing eyes like a rabbit's eyes reflecting light from a spotlight. I immediately thought, holy crap, it's a skinwalker. The skinwalker ran up to the edge of the road and just kept up pace with the bus, hurtling sagebrush and rocks while staring at me. After I made eye contact with the thing, I could not look away. It was as if something was holding my head and eyes in place. The skinwalker just smiled at me, this inhuman smile that went ear to ear, showing crooked yellow pointed teeth. I felt like I was going to throw up, and I was panicking through the whole ordeal. The skinwalker started to crumple down onto all fours, still keeping up with the bus. I could see his bones crack and reform. Hair started appearing all over the skinwalker's body. In about 3 seconds was now a coyote, and it ran off back into the desert out of view. As soon as it was gone, I ran to the onboard bathroom and puked a mixture of food and blood. I didn't want to tell anyone for fear they would think I was crazy. I confided in my Navajo friend. She told me that I needed to see the chief, who also happened to be a friend of mine, and get a blessing. I saw him the next school day in the parking lot. He just came up to me and mumbled something in Navajo while waving a feathered scepter-like thing, turned around, got his truck, and drove away. To this day, I haven't seen another skinwalker. It might be due to the fact I moved away from that town in res, and if I do have to go south, I go around, way around. That's good. Okay, so I'm going to pause, of course. I'll be back. Hope you will be too. All right, so I'm back now, and a little bit more rested. Starting with the same article we were on before, I was reviewing this post, and I went on and on and on for at least, a long time about my prefacing and worries and all of this, and I hope you all can bear with me. I bear no grudge to anybody who wants to, of course, pop forward straight into the readings. If that's what you're here for, that's fine with me. But then, of course, my disclaimer has been stated, so I don't feel any need to restate any of the big hits of the disclaimers. You know, that I have difficulty finding material. None of the material is my own. Tra-la to the rest of it and my own belief systems. I went to sleep a couple of nights in a row thinking to myself before I came back here, thinking to myself, wow, should I have said all that? And I feel fine with it. I know too well that I'm going to make encounters maybe along my lifetime on account of this that I will have regretted that statement to myself. But, you know, on the up and up, I feel fine with what I said. Of course, anything that happens to be somebody who's already been, you know, what I would say brainwashed, but it was not really, you know, the right declaration to make. But somebody who has changed their minds about cult worship is going to have to disagree with me, maybe not. It's not necessarily a given, but many people would. So I try not to hit ram head to ram head on that kind of thing. Unfortunately, my life is not free of that. So I feel free to express my opinions if I have the opportunity to, for that very same reason, and that's very true, unfortunately, for me. There, I said that. Okay, we're going to go on with this article now. Graveyard Shift magazine, story 4. Stay away from ruins of the Inquisition. This all happened about 5 years ago. One night, a few of my friends decided after a night of hanging out that we'd go on an adventure at about 3 a.m. We took a ride about 50 miles to this old Spanish ruin in New Mexico that was once the seat of the Inquisition. I can't for the life of me remember what the place is called. So we jump the front gates of the place and start exploring. One of my friends brought a flute with him, and he started playing it about 30 seconds into his mediocre playing. Okay, I don't know what to do at this point. I forgot to turn off my phone. I'm going to have to start this over. Hang on. It's a sad day for me. Let me see if I can go back in time. Nothing I can do about myself. The only thing I can do is ask everybody to jump forward with me. I'm going to restart the story. I don't know how to reset this recording device. I just be like backgrounding myself more and more if I keep explaining why things are as strange as they are. I'm just going on with my small K-Pro situation. That's it. Okay, so stay away from the ruins of the Inquisition. This is the Graveshard Shift magazine article from October 18th, 2019. Terrifying Stories of Skinwalkers, the legendary shapeshifters. This all happened about 5 years ago. One night, a few of my friends decided, after a night of hanging out, so about 2014, that we go out on an adventure at about 3 a.m. We took a ride about 50 miles to this old Spanish ruin in New Mexico that was once the seat of the Inquisition. I can't for the life of me remember what the place is called. So we jumped the front gates of the place and started exploring. One of my friends brought a flute with him, and he started playing it about 30 seconds into his mediocre playing. Something started screaming really, really loud on the tops of the long-destroyed walls of the place. It was going from wall to wall really quick, screaming the most blood-curdling scream you've ever imagined. We noped the fuck out of there. One of my friends pissed his pants and drove for a few hours to Bandelier National Monument, where we planned to camp out for the rest of the weekend. We got to Bandelier at probably like 6 or 7 a.m. and set up our camp. After a few hours just talking about what the hell happened at the ruins, I went to take a piss behind probably only like 300 feet from our camp. This is where everything starts getting a little fuzzy. I remember seeing 2 dust devils coming my way, and when I turned around again, 2 of my friends were there, and they were motioning me to follow them. I couldn't help but to follow them, like I was being pulled behind them in shackles. I followed them for what seemed like 10 or 15 minutes, and then I snapped out of it. These weren't my friends. They had bright red hair with my friends' faces and cat's eyes. Both of these friends were brunette. I stopped walking, and they looked at me with probably the most terrifying gaze I've ever seen. Monsters in movies are nothing compared to this. I turned around and ran as fast as I could the way I came from. After like 5 minutes of a full sprint, I got back to that rock that I pissed at and found our camp. Everyone was there, still sitting around talking, and didn't even notice that I was gone. I told them what happened with lookalike skinwalkers, and we packed up everything and left probably within like 10 minutes and got the hell back to Albuquerque. Oh my gosh. I believe him. You know what, maybe today and right now is not the best time. I have things going on today, and I thought I'd just introduce a few minutes of a recording and then not talk about my breaks. But you can see my career developing as a audio host to my own shows, even as, time clicks on to the recording, because I'm almost sure you heard those text notes. I'm sorry. Story 5, Convinced I Saw a Skinwalker. As many of you might already know, many Navajo people, including my own family, are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers because it is believed to attract their attention. Well, I, however, grew up away from the Navajo Nation and was very naive about the subject. When it came to skinwalkers, I was an absolute skeptic. My mom used to tell a story of how back in the 80s, when she lived with her siblings and my grandparents still in Shiprock, but the southern outskirts, about how she and my aunt saw a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a streetlight. She described it as a black dog with dirty fur, a twisted noodle-like front leg, and these unnatural eyes with a soft burnt orange glow. Me, being my own closed-minded self, doubted every word, but I never said my doubts aloud. But these doubts totally changed last year when I went to my grandparents' house last October. Me and my family had just finished scourging the carnival at the Navajo Nation Fair and called it night. The house was close enough where we could walk home in just 10 minutes, so we did. When we got there, it was about 9 at night, where we stayed up until about 2, catching up about family affairs and the local news. It was during that time that I just decidedly opened my mouth and blurted out the question, "Hey, are Skinwalkers real? Guys?" I asked. "You shouldn't be speaking about that," my grandma said, with almost a disturbed yell in her voice. So she and my grandfather both decide to go to bed. After being scolded by my mom, one of my aunts chimes in with a very cautious tone and says, "They're real, all right. Had a few start screaming outside of my trailer in Farmington just a few nights ago. Your cousin had nightmares the whole night and woke up crying that morning." Not wanting to push the discomfort any further, we all decided to go to bed. Now the trailer home is pretty old, and it was a really nice night, so we slept with the windows open with screens to prevent bugs coming in. Everyone had drifted off to sleep except me, because my mind was still going a million miles a minute about skinwalkers, and wondered if I ever encountered one while here on the reservation. As a kid, I was told it's taboo to think about skinwalkers because it can still call their attention. That's when the shit totally hit the fan. Just as I was settling and finally getting relaxed for sleep, I started to hear something moving outside. I get up from the couch and start wandering over to the kitchen window. In the trailer, all of the rooms have lights out, so the only visible light that can be seen is from the porch light out front. I was thankful for this because I told myself if it really was a skinwalker outside, then hopefully it wouldn't notice me seeing it. So I muster up the courage and take a quick scan of outside. From the porch light, all I can see is the dusty ground and the vehicles that my family drove along with some old metal trash cans that stood beside the road. Looking for about a good 5 seconds, I wasn't able to see anything, so I was getting ready to turn around and walk back to bed, thinking it was just a stray cat or something. Only have taken 2 steps, I hear what sound like a distorted scream coming from outside, definitely close by. Fear rising, I look outside again, and there I see it. A coyote-like figure was staring at my direction from behind the cars, just outside of the reach of the porch light. Only it looked awfully wrong and gave off an evil vibe just from seeing it. It was gray with very disheveled hair, and a horrific orange-red soft glow came from its eyes. I noped the hell out and ran back to the bedroom. Nope. It was at this point I had begun to also notice an awful stench in the air that smelled like rotting meat. I started trying to wake up my mom, who was like, "OMG, it's almost 3 a.m., what do you want?" I immediately began in a shaken voice, "There's something scary outside." Then she said, now annoyed because I woke her up, "It's probably just a stray animal or something. It's the res animals wander all the time at night." She obviously wasn't getting the drift of what I was saying, so I screamed, "There's some Blair Witch Project shit going on outside, Ma." That got her attention. "What? What the hell are you talking about?" she said. Then we heard it. The thing outside started making more of its dreadful-like screams and starting what sounded like thrashing outside the ground. "Hear that? That's what I'm talking about." So both her and I got back up, looked outside the window, and the coyote thing was making its way to the door. It walked with an odd limp and dragged its back right leg as if it was handicapped. We could hear it start to scratch against the door and make this odd muffled moaning sound. My mom went in and got my dad, and they both started to shout in Navajo all sorts of words, telling the thing to go away and saying it's not welcome here. Well, all this commotion was enough to get the rest of the trailer up as they came out in the hallway. The only thing my mom did was turn to them and said, "Skinwalker," while proceeding to point to the door, noises still happening. Apparently they already knew exactly what to do, as my grandfather got out a handgun from the drawer and a bag of ashes. He coated a few bullets and loaded them into the gun and went straight to the door, yelling out more Navajo. That was too fast for me to comprehend. And he swung open the door and fired twice. Nothing. The thing managed to escape before my grandpa could put a bullet in it. "That's the fastest one I've ever seen," said my grandpa. Next thing you know, my aunts and my parents are freaking out about what just happened and saying stuff like, "What if it comes back tomorrow and it sighs? Does that mean we're targets now?" Afterwards, my grandparents calmed everyone down, myself included, saying, "We'll be fine," and we all went to bed around 3-ish. Morning comes and my grandparents call one of their neighbors and explain to them what happened. Apparently one of them was a medicine man who used to partake in Yabi Chai's Navajo ceremonies. Yabi Chai's, not sure. Navajo ceremonies used for healing and curing sickness, and came over to bless each family member and the grounds outside. Well, it ended well. Story 6. Say their name and it will kill them. We live in a rural community on the Navajo reservation. My aunt and her 2 brothers were home alone while my grandparents had left for the evening to attend a chapter house meeting. They were in the house, and like many people from the reservation, they didn't have electricity. It had been dark outside for about an hour, and my aunt and my uncles were getting ready for bed. Outside, they heard noises as if someone moving things around outside. My oldest uncle went to look out the front window and saw a figure out by the truck. This was immediately out of the ordinary because the closest neighbor was miles away. Whatever it was opened the truck door and began to dig through the personal items that my family had left in the vehicle. My aunt and uncles were frightened by the sight. I knew that they should take action. They took out the rifle and all steadied themselves to hold it up. They flung open the door and aimed the gun at the dark figure. The figure turned and started to walk towards them, totally unfazed by the weapon. My uncle pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. The figure drew closer, and my aunt began to smell something like a rotting corpse. It was so strong it made her gag. My uncle continued to pull the trigger with no luck, and the figure came closer and closer. Off the distance, headlights were coming up the road. My grandparents were returning. The figure looked towards the lights and started to move away and tucked itself behind a tree near the house. My oldest uncle ran toward the truck with a gun. My grandfather got out of the car and my uncle pointed to the tree. The thing was poking out its head to observe what they were doing. My grandfather ran into the house and over to the stove and grabbed a handful of ashes and rubbed over the gun and placed an ash-covered bullet into the chamber. He walked out onto the porch and fired toward the tree. Whatever that thing was didn't expect the gun to go off. The gunshot echoed and the dark figure began running. My grandma chased my aunt inside, and my uncles and my grandfather went with it after it. And my uncles and my grandfather went after it. There weren't many roads or paths, so as my grandfather and uncles chased the figure, the truck was bouncing and the headlights were not fixed on one particular spot. My uncle swears that whenever the headlights would hit the figure, he saw a woman. Not only that, whoever it was running on all fours like a bear. My grandfather eventually stopped the truck, and as they neared the ditch that drops about 20 feet, he got out and began to yell in Navajo. My uncle says that he was yelling about a local woman. He yelled that he wasn't scared and that he knew it was her and to leave his family alone. A few days passed, and there was news that the woman that my grandfather was yelling about had passed. I've always been told that if you know who the Skinwalker is, say their name and it will kill them. The next story is Story 7, A Mysterious Legend Encounters Mormon Missionaries. I'm going to stop with that today since I'm fearing that my telephone is going to keep hitting my other day's highlights. Besides this, it probably wasn't a good idea to come back today when I didn't have a better plan. But these 2 stories give me a chance to say it's very notable that the Skinwalkers are... Okay, so what I mean by shapeshifters are people, I can't say it anymore, makes me sound literally crazy. People who are actors in Star Trek who turn up worshiping Odo because he's a shapeshifter. That's what I mean by a shapeshifter, is like the example of the character of Odo who just changes shape and becomes somebody different. I believe in those creatures too, but then there's Skinwalkers being the same, like the replicants in the Replicant movie, from way back, and there was another one. And then there's the ancient mysteries of these that are the more prevalent. And these are the much more interesting ones, of course, because those are more science fiction, futuristic, I guess, android folklore as opposed to, I don't know. So I also wanted to clarify that, but listening to the shows that I have been on YouTube, I'm sorry I'm not sharing them, but I'm not sure that I should share them anyway. It's clear to me that they're describing creatures that have killed humans unfairly or under their terms of justice, and that they're bringing forward. They don't even finish killing them sometimes. They just threatening to, and then possess them, and then throw them back to life to think about what may have happened, and they never have any recollection because they leave the memory of the possession in a witness that they take at the same time. This is a pattern. And or the person has died, or particularly it's unknown if they are died, they're missing. So they possess them, and they come back in the moment to show the spirit of the possession to the living that they want to see it. They're bearing themselves to the living to prove a point, and then to get what the fight would be at this point, what they could get for it, which is pretty much, if I understand that Navajo tradition, they're giving it to with the ash bullet. It's a pretty big, it would be like a bonfire full of poisons for their folklore or something. I would imagine they're looking at a very bad situation, a face-off if it ever became like a guerrilla war kind of thing, that the aliens that are controlling this fanfare of monstrous, shamanism would ever confront and then start like a desert war or a wilderness war or something like that. That they would end up, having a war in their hands. So in a tradition they'd understand. So I'm interpreting a lot of things, but I wanted to mention that the shamanistic intent, the mystery intent is to grab the human soul, possess it, or kill it, and then show it to a specific witness, and then bear a response of some kind, whatever it is, to determine what the response would be to that, and then to break off all communication, to terminate it. It seems to be the pattern over and over and over again, is instead of an affront attack, a battle attack, continued attack, it's following a very important pattern now, and it doesn't really have the same stranger earmarks than that. It never quits being the same thing, whereas other stories that I heard in former times aren't always corresponding to this constant pattern. Okay, I'm going to have to stop right here. Thank you for listening. Okay, I'm beginning again now with story 9 from the Graveyard Shift article about Skinwalkers and other scary legends and cryptids. The story 9 is A Mysterious Legend Encounters Mormon Missionaries. While trading stories around a campfire, my friend recalled an encounter he had while serving an LDS mission. LDS stands for Latter-day Saints, in case you don't know. My friend's mission region had a reservation within its boundaries. However, it was relatively far from where he was serving. Excuse me, I got a pop-up ad. On one occasion, him and his mission companion were asked to travel further than usual to meet with some investigators. This took them near the reservation. On their way home, their car ran out of gas, and it wasn't until late at night that they were able to continue the journey home. My friend, who was driving while his companion slept in the passenger seat, chose a different route that took him through some back roads in an attempt to get home sooner. He told us he was driving above the speed limit when he noticed movement in the woods lining the road. Because coyotes were common in the area, he took little notice at first. Then he looked out the window and slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop jolted his companion awake, who immediately wanted to know what was wrong. My friend was shaken and said he would tell him once they got home. He asked him to say a prayer. By the time they made it home, his companion was dying to know what had happened. My friend told him, I looked down at the road next to the car and saw 6 men running on all fours, keeping up with the car. I was driving 40 miles an hour. That's pretty scary. Story 10. The Yanal Delushi has found me. That's a Native American translation of Skinwalker, I think. Yanal Delushi. My grandmother on her mother's side has always been very superstitious. For lack of better words, she's not religious, but she does believe in a lot of paranormal stuff. Her mother was full-blooded Navajo and her father was Irish. Either way, she'd never been anywhere east of Montana, and she grew up in Nevada. One year, when I was in grade school, we went to visit her. Most of the visit was pretty eventful, typical boring old people stuff, except she always kept her curtains drawn shut and would always peek out the window, and when somebody asked what she was doing, she would simply reply, Yalan Delushi is watching me. Yalan Delushi. This went on for nearly the entire visit until a few days before we were due to leave. My grandma and my then baby brother, he's 19 now, LOL, were in the front yard that evening planting flowers when all of a sudden my grandmother starts shouting, Insert little brother's name here. Get away from that creature. So she was screaming. I didn't realize what it was. She was screaming the little brother's name. Get him away from that creature. It's not safe. Of course, being in Nevada, we all assumed that my brother had found a scorpion or a rattlesnake. So we all ran outside to see my grandmother crouching my little brother and shaking in terror against the side of the house, standing out in the yard. And there was a large black Great Dane-sized dog. It was staring at my grandmother with an intensity I'd never seen before. It looked up at us, gave a little huff, and bounded off. I don't remember if it moved unusually fast or not, but I do remember it had really deep yellow eyes. When my mother asked my grandmother what had happened, she kept repeating, "The Yenaldelushi has found me." She moved a couple of weeks after that. The visit triggered her omen fears. Maybe she was accepting that she wanted, those relatives to come to make all the cataclysm of the situation happen and move on. I'm thinking maybe that was the logic in the whole thing. I'm sorry that I don't really preview these, but I overview them. So when I come to something like that, I'm not prepared. I apologize. Okay, the next story 11. A coyote walking on two legs. Wow. That's something out of a fairy tale. I was told this story once. My dad isn't a bullshitter or a liar, so I know the story is true. So this was the very early 80s, and my sister, who lived in Toronto, came down to visit our parents for a weekend. She was staying at a friend's house who loaned her a car so she could come out. After her visit, she left a little after 9 p.m. She got maybe 7-8 miles away when the car broke down. Thankfully, she broke down in front of a friend of the family's house. They let her in to call Dad, and Dad came to get her. The family said she could leave the car in their driveway for the night, and my sister decided to just stay at my parents' for the night. It was now a little after 10 p.m. and pitch black, late November, while my sister and Dad were driving back to the house, and they passed through a heavily wooded area. Out of nowhere, they hear this incredibly effing loud and human scream that was heard over the engine, them talking, and the radio. Dad slammed on the brakes, and they both started freaking out when suddenly a 6-foot-tall coyote walking on two legs with a black-white striped tail appeared on the side of the road and proceeded to walk in front of the car. As soon as it passed, that same scream played again, only this time 10 times louder. Dad slammed on the accelerator, and they got the F out of there. It was never seen again. That's something else. Story number 12. The creature had a human face. My roommate has told me this story a few times, and I want to see if anyone else has had similar experiences. As he tells it, he was driving home super late at night, maybe around 3 or 4 a.m. in the suburb of Phoenix, Arizona, both times that this occurred. The first time he was driving alone on a road that has an open field to the left of it, when out of nowhere a black figure on all four bounds up out of the field and across the road in front of his car. As soon as the figure got to the other side of the road, it stops with inhuman quickness, turns around, and looks directly at my roommate. He described the figure as looking simian, completely black except for the face, so he was looking like a monkey. The creature's face was a stark white human face, not white as in Caucasian, but white as snow. This happened again a few weeks later, but this time the creature was sitting in a tree. As his car approached, it climbed down the tree, again with inhuman quickness, bounded across the road, stopped on a dime and turned around and made eye contact with him. This time he had a friend in the car who also saw it and began freaking out. It was the same exact thing as the first time, a simian black body with a snow-white expressionless human face. My roommate, ever the curious one, turned the car around and began searching for the creature, but it was nowhere to be seen. Crazy. The White Masked Creature. In Hunt for the Skinwalker, it's the title, George Knapp and Colm Keller relay the stories of those who came into contact with skinwalkers near Native American tribal lands. One account from a New Mexico Highway Patrol officer states that while patrolling the highways of New Mexico, he saw a skinwalker on 2 separate occasions. In his first encounter, a creature wearing a white mask appeared next to his window, seemingly attaching itself to the car door. But then he realized it was simply running beside the vehicle, keeping pace at highway speeds. A few days later, and around the same area, he encountered the creature again. What makes this tale even more intriguing is that I had another pop-up ad. At least one other officer claimed to have seen the same ghoulish being while patrolling the area. That's crazy. These speed demons, these speed beasts are similar. I probably shouldn't say it because it's so cliche, but African highways record the same thing all the time, but they're recognizable. They're not skinwalkers by any means. They're recognizable either, I'm sorry to say it, but dingoes, hyenas, all sorts of cheetahs. They record kind of cat-dog species, otherwise hybrids that probably should be known. And then, of course, they have the folklore. I'm not an African continental national of any kind, so I wouldn't be able to say that I know where to look those stories up. I don't think I'd find any in the U.S. on any websites anyway. But I know that I've heard that they have accountability even of related kind of skinwalkers. I don't know what they'd call them because, of course, there's no Native American tribal cross-reference. But the African wilderness is loaded with circumstantial situational similarities to the southwestern North Continent stories. It's kind of amazing. If I could prove it, I can't, but I know what I'm saying is true. Anyway, I have to take a quick break, and I'm coming right back. Okay, so I'm beginning again. A few minutes later. Okay, story 14. There were two skinwalkers. On the Ghost Stories blog, Darkness Prevails, user John shared his story of how a relaxing midnight stroll turned terrifying when he came face-to-face with two skinwalkers. According to his chilling story, John was out late one summer night. While listening to music and enjoying the cool weather, he walked near a large empty field that was adjacent to a college campus. Suddenly, he felt something staring at him. Shining his flashlight out into the darkness, he saw two sets of glowing orange eyes staring back at him. The eyes were at least 7 feet off the ground and stared at him without blinking once. John made a mad dash for safety. As he was running, he turned back to see one of the creatures chasing him. John became even more frightened when he got a better glimpse of the fast-moving creature behind him. It looked like a giant wolf. Quickening his pace, John reached his home safely, but he remains fearful of the monsters he saw that night, which he believes were skinwalkers. Yep. Story 15. This was no normal girl. According to an account from Darkness Prevails, not all skinwalkers are found around reservations or even within the U.S. for that matter. This tale of terror comes all the way from Australia. Yeah, I think they're pretty much worldwide legends. Southeast Asia reports them. Africa does. Australia, I don't know as much, but I know that they've started to mention it. I guess most places are keeping them concealed. I'm originally from Europe somewhere, and there isn't a European country that doesn't continue to promote the fabulous folklore that became the Idlewild for a story of the ages of the plagues in the second millennia. They're still saying that the Skinwalker story was huge. That was the huge controlling story of the forest world of Northern Europe for the most part. I don't know if anybody. I think I have a pretty good stab at that argument. But walking wolves, controlling demonic presences of that descriptive kind, huge, fabulous history. The Beastman saga of. What was the second age of man versus the wild kind of literature in folklore. Before that, it was man versus, lizards and dragons and talking dragons and fairy tales and fairies and fictions. And then after that, when life became more realistic by the second millennia of the past world, recently, we're talking about Beastmen and their controlling demonic occult circumstance of being sighted all the time. That was the huge legend. I guess that begins in the Dark Ages and then it goes on, but it goes on through the medieval era. I think you don't really hear more about it for a little while around maybe the 18th century. You do? Okay, I'm getting contradictions. So yeah, it's been prevalent everywhere. Okay, moving on. Okay, so This tale of terror comes all the way from Australia. While walking her dogs out in the Australian bush, a woman encountered a fearful sight. She was enjoying the trail when suddenly her two dogs started barking uncontrollably and becoming extremely agitated. Soon she saw what appeared to be a small female child, no older than 7. The child had her back to the woman, who was only a bit startled at first, as she believed the child was just a part of a camping party. However, when the girl turned around, her eyes were lifeless and entirely black. Oh my gosh, my whole page is covered. I'm sorry. By an ad. So when the girl turned around, her eyes were lifeless and entirely black. Before the woman could make a break for it, the creature let out an ear-splitting howl and ran off into the bush, never to be seen again. She was left wondering if the child she saw was someone pulling a prank on her, or if it was really a shape-shifting skinwalker. She may never know. I believe all these stories, so I believe that the people must have been in their sane mind. There's too many accounts of the same similarity of a kind of a thing being seen. So when I say I've had too much, I meant a different kind of, a more science fiction android kind of exposure to the idea of people who share the same identity and look the same. That's also known as a skinwalker, by the way. I know that I have that right. I even checked, so I'm not apologizing for it. But shapeshifters, I know it's a little bit harder for anybody to believe. But since we're talking about science fiction, so the difference between animals bearing on the distinction of humanity and human beings doing the same thing is too macabre for me to be realistic about it. I'm saying something implicatedly too horrible to be taken sanely. I understand that, but I don't care. I promote that I have had a lifetime of exposure to some kind of strange shamanism, and that's all that I meant to say. But no, I haven't had the privilege of seeing that many outrageously like wilderness experiences of bestial humanity. No, you have to really be looking out for that kind of thing, and I don't. But shamanism is like very close to my lifetime story, so there's nothing much I can do about it. I would never. If I had to tell the truth, I would never say that I don't understand that my definition of skinwalkers and shapeshifters happens to be true, by the way. And I know that they're in the same region of folklore of occult shamanism. You're talking about a war between shamans that has never been properly exposed in like the last few centuries of Earth. And so I wanted to say what I wanted to say about it, and I did. That's all. Okay. Last story. Faster than any dog. There was one time I went camping with 2 of my buddies, but neither of them are really outdoorsy types. I was just kind of getting them into the whole camping hunting scene. Now I love hiking, exploring more like because I hate just walking a trail. You're seeing nothing new. So I took the 2 friends out there a ways and got 2 miles from the camp when they just wanted to go back. I said fine and showed them where to go on my phone and made them put a waypoint on the little GPS thing I had to follow. I wanted to keep going, so I did by myself. They wanted the pistol I had on me for safety reasons, leaving me to walk alone in the forest with water and nothing else. No big deal, I thought. I found a steep hillside with rocks all the way down when I was about 5 miles from camp and decided to go down. I followed the path to the bottom of this thing, which was at this point just a dry riverbed. I walked down and it got steeper as I went further south. When I crossed a certain point, something just felt wrong. I started trying to look around for anything, but there was a huge log across the 2 hillsides, and when I crouched down to crawl under it, it felt like I was being watched. I looked up to my left, saw nothing. Looked around to see if there was anything in the middle of the riverbed, then looked up to the right. Huge black canine. Too small to be a bear, but it looked like a wolf on steroids. That dog creature and I held glances for what felt like hours, but I know it couldn't have been more than 10 seconds. Every passing moment made the feeling of dread worse. I moved backwards just to get the hell out of there, and when I moved, the wolf thing just booked it into the forest further from the camp. In hindsight, this thing was moving faster than any dog I've ever seen. So that's a very sober account of something extremely paranormal. They can't be, otherwise cataloged for, its visionary differential from what should be realism, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the end of that article from Graveyard Shift. Some really excellent stories. And Terrifying Stories of Skinwalkers, the Legendary Shapeshifters. And there's another article also here that talk about you've no doubt seen or heard of the shadow people, but what are they? So it's a whole article about these shadow people and how they date back to mythological ages of Egypt. And I might read that. I haven't decided. It's also from this article, from this set of articles about sci-fi creatures. And then there's another list of articles about short stories, about Wendigos, which I think is probably what I'm going to read first afterwards. But I'm going to post this, so it'll all be in a separate post. I haven't decided how I'm doing it. I still have more shapeshifters. As far as my editorialization, I gave it one big, it's mostly all of this post introduction. I don't think I'm ever going to do any more personal opinion backgrounding of where I'm coming from for why I'm reading these stories. It's just a very, kind of personal interest. I'm also haven't had the chance in my lifetime to research or to study or to listen to stories about Bigfoot legends. It's kind of on the periphery of what any kind of shaman literary intention would be. I guess I'm mostly interested in reading folklore. It's hard to find, so it's mostly like literature about religious ideals of ancient societies and all that, and then you can find some folklores beside that. So I'm trying to be as vague as possible, but the Bigfoot legends don't really figure in that category of literature, because that's just about basically giants and the changing evolution. So it's science fiction to believe in human beings, without apes. And I like reading that kind of literature because I like taking apes out of the whole picture and just seeing human beings changing their shape and size. They were giants, and then they started becoming smaller giants. So I'm trying to follow that. And in the middle of it, you find out that, no, it's true, there kind of were apes, but there were these, like, the Neanderthal were kind of like half apes, and the hominids were about half apes, half people, part of evolution, yeah. But I believe in too many things because of the shaman folklore, like snake people and aliens and things. So, dragons and myths that were living creatures. So I'm trying to kind of like hack away at what were folklore legends in the past, in the recent past, that were visionary, and have not had a minute to look at Bigfoot credibly. The Bigfoot folklore has become a rage recently in the most dire times of our latter days. Bigfoot occurrences have been connected by paranormalists to a lot of tragedies that we've recently seen. They're like signs that haven't been really critically observed in, prophecies of folklores, so people who are looking and reading at that literature, but also making sure that there's like prophetic checkpoint, and there are people who do that, and they're seeing that this is kind of like the age of that. They're all connected, I find. The skinwalkers, the shamans, the shapeshifters, and the aliens that I'm talking about all the time, and the Bigfoot legend. So I find that very interesting. But I can't be more defining. So anyway, I thought I'd just hit it with one huge, ridiculous preface on a personal basis, and then I'm going to take off and just like read some more articles as time goes on casually, and that's about it. Okay, thank you for listening.